Oh no, he went there. The Boots UK Christmas TV commercial. Directed by David Mayer through Radical, this is a commercial that has certainly set the Twitter sphere on fire. You've probably read, heard or listened to some of the comments about it, but here is where we see what students and juniors can learn from this. Let's take a look.
They want to know. Sugar plum, snowball, come in. Shall we? How do I look?
Slaying.
Maya, fabulous.
Really?
She'll love that.
Robin.
Oh, that's very them. Next. Marvelous. Incoming. Good. Oh. This one's mine.
We're out of bows.
We are never out of bows. Last one. You thought it was all him.
As you can see, rather than Father Christmas, who spends most of the commercial asleep, we have Mrs. Christmas. Now, Mrs. Christmas is not a new idea. We've seen Mrs. Christmases in previous Christmas adverts, particularly in the UK. In fact, the concept of Mrs. Christmas, I think, must be an exclusively advertising one. However, the idea of the man being a useless deadweight is a lazy trope. We've seen this time and time again in advertising. And if companies believe that by belittling one gender or raising another gender over them is good for business, then I think they've got the British public wrong. A lot of men do shop at Boots, and a lot of women actually are very fond of the men that they're partnered up with. So insulting people is probably not a good way to go. That's rule one. If somebody else has had that idea, don't go over that ground again. It's been done. Try something different. The second thing you'll notice is not only has Father Christmas been sidelined, he spends the whole commercial asleep, there are almost no other men. So while it could be understandable that Father Christmas might be a bit useless, it's also possible that some of the elves who are helping Mrs. Christmas might be guys. But not in this commercial. Almost everybody in the workshop appears to be a girl. That makes it feel like Boots is on a mission or is trying to make a statement, or certainly the people working for Boots or the agency are trying to make a statement that is placing women above men. I think that got people's backs up as well. The second rule then is just because you believe that your market is all women, don't assume that you can only show women in your commercial, because women often like men or are related to them. Also, a lot of men buy presents for women. Where do you think they might go and buy those presents? Possibly Boots. Although obviously this year, if you read all the comments, definitely not Boots. Mrs. Christmas is played by Bridgerton star Adjoa Andoh, whose other standout role was critiquing the British royal family on the balcony at the coronation for being too white. Now, while Adjoa is entitled to her own opinions, her comments created a furore, particularly in the British tabloid press. So casting someone who was already seriously pissed off a large proportion of the British public as the main player in your commercial is bold to say the least. If you're doing a Christmas TV commercial for a major British brand, be as populist as you can and pick yourself a lead actor who you know the nation loves. All the nation, not just a small proportion of the nation. And particularly don't pick someone who quite a few people in the country are quite angry about. Most importantly for me is this is a commercial for Boots, but however many times I watch it, I can't really see what they're selling. There are gifts and there are packages and there are parcels and there are bows and there are things being passed around, but I never get the chance to actually see what is being sold. The entire focus is on Adjoa Andoh and her elves and everything else that's going on, which looks spectacular. But as far as what I might get from Boots, I don't know. What I get from Boots is I get an attitude. I get girl power, I get men are a little bit useless, and I get quite a woke narrative, which while popular in some quarters is deeply unpopular in others. Again, you're Boots, you've been here over 100 years. Everybody knows who you are. People love you. Be lovable, don't divide people. So let's have a little look at the idea. At least there is an idea. You think Father Christmas does the work, it's actually Mrs. Christmas. Boom. Very simple. But for me, there's more than the politics of this commercial that make it not work. It's just not funny. There's not one moment that you can pick and go, ah, that's good. Now, this is where it gets a little bit controversial. I see a lot of commercials with black actors in, and I do wonder if people stop with their diversity at a black person with a very English accent, wearing very Western clothes, and that is a box ticked. I actually think the casting in this ad is lazy. Boots obviously decided they didn't want a white Mrs. Christmas, so they went for the obvious alternative, which is a black Mrs. Christmas. But there are many ethnicities in the world, and we see almost none of them in advertising. Where do we see Turkish people? Where do we see Filipinos? Where do we see Jordanians? Where do we see Muslim women wearing a burqa in a main role in a British TV commercial? Personally, I would love to have seen Mrs. Christmas in a burqa or with a bindi. Do something that other commercials aren't doing. Be different. This spot feels way more political than just a simple Christmas TV ad. It feels that there is an agenda at Boots. The agenda is against men and the agenda is pro-women. Which, if that was the brief, they've done perfectly. If the brief was to tell the British public at Christmas that Boots is a fantastic retailer and you can buy any number of presents for men and women here, I think it's a fail. Ridiculing men, casting an actor who has made racist comments about the British royal family, and an absolute absence of any humour is definitely not a great idea for a British Christmas TV commercial. Certainly not for a major retailer. Remember, in advertising, you're here to sell. You want the maximum amount of people possible to like you, your product, and what you're saying about it. And as far as advertising goes, when you divide, you rarely conquer. My name's Chaz Bayfield. You've been listening to St. George. See you next time.